The following program is paid for by Lifespan Wealth Management, providing financial advice since 1993. At Lifespan Wealth Management, the main thing they do is provide retirement planning and advice and manage their clients' investment accounts. If you're looking for a financial advisor, contact their office at 478-922-8100 to set up your complimentary consultation. Lifespan Wealth Management has offices in Macon and Warner Robins for your convenience, and you can learn more about them by visiting their website at retirerelax.com. While you're on the site, visit the special report section, which provides great financial education information on many different topics. You can also sign up to receive their digital feeds, which are short videos providing great information relevant to retirement, investing, and matters that affect your money. They also offer seminars to the community at no cost. If you're looking for a guest speaker for your church or civic organization, give them a call to discuss the topics you would like them to cover. Again, their contact number is 478-922-8100. Now, from the Macon studio of News Talk 940 WMAC, it's time for Your Money with Sherry Goss, Randy Goss, Jonathan Eisner, and Corey Albrecht.
Good morning, everyone. It is great to be back with you on this beautiful Saturday. It is going to be hot, but historically, it has been worse this time of the year.
Anyway, we have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, in case you missed it, Jonathan is not here today, but we expect him back soon. He is still in Atlanta with his son, who had a terrible accident on the 4th of July and broke his neck. He's been transferred from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta to the Shepherd Center for rehab. They have a big hill to climb. There has been support page set up through supportnow.org.
And if you've never heard of Support Now, it is different than the GoFundMe accounts that you hear about all the time. Support Now is a place where money, meals, and more can be donated for the benefit of the person, not just money. So if you're inclined, Google supportnow.org and search for Gabe Eisner, and I believe they're the only Eisner on the site. And so just keep them in your prayers and as they move through this very rough time. So, all right. We have some good economic news, especially for Texas. Toyota Motor has announced that it is investing $3.6 billion to move production from the Tacoma pickup truck from a plant in Mexico to its San Antonio, Texas manufacturing campus. The investment is expected to create 2,000 jobs at the facility and add a second vehicle assembly line, which will roughly double the size of the 2.7 million square foot plant by 2030. This will expand the plant's annual production capacity from roughly 200,000 to 350,000 units. The announcement is part of Toyota's stated plans to invest up to $10 billion more in the United States than previously expected domestically through 2030.
That's fantastic.
It is.
So let's talk about how most Americans become millionaires. According to studies by Northwestern Mutual and several other companies, the United States is home to roughly 23.8 million millionaires. And you might think this money was inherited. However, the studies showed that about 85% of these individuals did not inherit their wealth, meaning the vast majority are first-generation rich. The exact numbers vary slightly depending on how wealth is calculated and how inheritance is defined. And the $1 million threshold factored in all total assets, including real estate equity. Then, if you strip away home equity and look strictly at investable liquid assets like stocks, cash, and bonds, the number of millionaires is closer to 8.7 million people, down from the 23.8 previously mentioned.
A study by Ramsey Wealth shows that only a small minority of American millionaires owe their status to family windfalls. In the largest survey of its kind, tracking over 10,000 millionaires, 79% received absolutely zero inheritance. Only 21% received any inheritance at all, and a mere 3% inherited $1 million or more. And Northwestern Mutual found that 79% of American millionaires consider themselves self-made, while only 11 to 12% stated they primarily inherited their wealth. The remaining percentage reported standard windfalls like lottery wins or legal settlements. So where and how do people get their money? Most data confirms that consistent long-term workplace retirement savings and stock market investments remain the primary driver for the vast majority of U.S. millionaires.
Yep. And if you read the book by Thomas Stanley, The Millionaire Next Door, it supports the data previously cited that the vast majority of millionaires receive zero inheritance. Instead, 80% achieve their milestones by regularly allocating a portion of their income to employer-sponsored retirement plans like a 401k. The actual behaviors, spending choices, and family dynamics made self-made American millionaires define distinct approach to managing wealth. Today, we live in a world where we can click on a button or two on our phones and packages arrive a day or two later. This creates a spending habit of instant gratification versus planning and taking time to determine if you really need the item.
The point is there is a psychology of money, and the path to a 7-figure net worth for the average American is remarkably ordinary. First, in the 401k. If you work for a company offering a 401k and contribute to the program and don't touch it, just let it sit there and work for you for 3 or 4 decades, you'll have a very nice nest egg when you are ready to retire. If you have an employer who offers a matching contribution, then you basically are doubling your money up to a stated percentage. The amount an employer contributes varies, but most offer 3%, and I've seen the match as high as 8%.
The thing that you must remember is that the money you put into your 401k is pre-tax, so the amount the IRS sees as taxable income does not include the amount you are contributing to your 401k or the amount your employer contributes. Since this is a tax-deferred account, the IRS will tax you on your standard tax rate you are paying based on your income. But remember this, if you take money out before 59.5, the IRS penalizes you an additional 10%, so it is best to not touch it. Understanding that not everyone will go to work for an employer who offers a workplace retirement program, so that leaves it up to the individual to be proactive and responsible enough to create their own savings vehicle. The smart money would be to open a Roth IRA, which is funded in after-tax dollars.
Yeah, the Roth is a very good deal. This year, you can contribute $7,500 if you're under 50 years of age, and those over 50 can add an additional $1,100 catch-up contribution. The $7,500 figure equates to about $625 per month. So take it out of your income first when creating your budget, and then live on the rest. We recommend automating this deduction from your paycheck or checking account directly into the Roth account monthly.
A common misconception is that people who become millionaires are CEOs, celebrities, and sports stars. The top 5 professions for American millionaires include engineers, accountants, teachers, management professionals, and attorneys, which is what I see every day. But that is not everyone. We have clients who systematically add money to their investment accounts from their business each month and have been doing so for 20 plus years, and they are millionaires. We have a client who worked for Sears as an appliance repairman. He retired a millionaire, and there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about a cashier at Costco who retired a millionaire.
Yeah, and then there's one of my favorite stories, and that's Ronald Reed, who secretly retired a multimillionaire. Unbeknownst to his family, friends, and neighbors, the Vermont-based gas station attendant, not the owner, and the JCPenney janitor.
I love this story.
Yep. So he had these 2 jobs, gas station attendant and the JCPenney janitor. He amassed $8 million before passing away in 2014 at the age of 92. According to the analysis of his life, his number 1 rule was frugality. He lived far below his means. He famously drove a secondhand car, chopped his own firewood, and used safety pins to hold his worn flannel coat together.
That's just funny.
It is funny. His other rule were about debt avoidance, where he treated consumer debt as an emergency and paying off credit cards immediately, and prioritized a mortgage-free lifestyle. He also understood the stock market. Although he never made more than that $45,000 a year through his job, he invested in blue chip dividend paying stocks. He never chased crypto or tried to time the market, and it worked out for him.
When he died, records show that he was earning $20,000 per month or $240,000 annually, but only living off his tiny Social Security check. Ronald's life may sound extreme for some, but the typical American millionaire lives are a life of stealth wealth, deliberately avoiding flashy displays of luxury. They do this by living below their means. They prioritize financial peace over social status, choosing not to keep up with the Joneses. They drive practical vehicles instead of leasing brand new luxury sports cars. They typically buy reliable, certified pre-owned vehicles and drive them for 10 years or longer.
Yep. Modest housing. They live in average middle-class neighborhoods where the cost of living allows them to save more money. When they travel, they look for flight deals, opt for Economy Plus over first class, and use their smartphones until they literally stop working. They track their expenses meticulously and allocate their free time to reading, exercising, and personal growth rather than unstructured internet browsing.
Yeah, and they have different attitudes on raising children. Millionaires are highly protective of their children's work ethic, and actively trying to prevent an entitled or spoiled kid mentality. Many use structured allowances to teach budgeting. They introduced the 3-jar system early on, which is separating earnings into distinct buckets for spending. And those buckets will be spending, investing, and giving. Millionaire parents regularly decline to buy their children luxury items or the latest gadgets immediately, forcing them to save money on their own if they want to purchase those items. They expect their children to obtain regular, real-world jobs where they are judged entirely on performance rather than on family connections. Parents prefer spending money on educational tools, books, and experiences that foster growth, a growth mindset over buying designer clothing or premium toys. They focus on dinner table conversations, on ideas, business strategies, and opportunities rather than the financial stress.
And I should have thrown this in there, but we did the 3-jar system with our kids when they were in grade school, and it taught them to be focused on things they needed to be doing and that they weren't doing.
My most favorite part of that was the challenge where we didn't want to spend money. We wanted to spend as little on utilities as we could.
Yes.
And so
that was fun.
We had the light challenge. So if someone was caught leaving a light on in a room, they had to take $1 out of their envelope, basically, or their jar, and put it in whoever caught them. And man, it was
hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's like within 24 hours, they both were so focused on cutting lights off. It was just funny. And it created a habit. And so you can do a lot of stuff with the jar. You can have, whatever you want to do. As far as having a jar on the counter where they get to take a quarter out or put a quarter in so that they can see the positive effects that they're having on themselves as they change their habits. It was a very, very fun program that we did. Anyway.
Yeah, my brothers are really bad about turning the fan off when they leave the room.
Yes.
I've baked it kind of into my morning routine that the first thing I do when I get up is I go turn my fan off before I go to the bathroom to brush my teeth. But
very nice.
You just got to figure out something that works for you.
Yep.
So what is better to own, gold or silver? One question we get from time to time is, should I own gold or silver? And it's a great question because while people tend to lump them together as precious metals, price aside, they really serve two very different purposes. Think of it this way. If you own a share of a stock, you own part of a business. That business has employees, products, customers, and hopefully profits. It can grow, innovate, and potentially pay dividends. That's an asset that can actually create value over time.
Yep. And but both gold and silver are different. They don't produce income. They don't pay dividends. They don't invent new products. Their role isn't to create wealth. It's primarily to preserve wealth. And understanding that distinction helps explain why investors continue to own them. Let's start with gold. Gold has been viewed as money for literally thousands of years. And long before paper currency existed, civilizations all over the world recognized gold as something valuable. Even today, despite all of our modern financial markets, central banks around the world continue to hold enormous reserves of gold.
So now ask yourself this question. Why would central banks own gold if it no longer mattered? The answer is simple. Gold is considered a store of value. It has no counterparty party risk, which is a fancy way of saying default risk. This is the risk that a party involved in a financial transaction may fail to fulfill their contractual obligations. It can't go bankrupt. It isn't dependent on the earnings of a company or the financial health of a government. During times of high inflation, banking uncertainty, geopolitical conflict, or concerns about the value of paper currencies, investors often turn to gold as a form of financial insurance.
I noticed you said insurance, and that's a good term to use. An example of this would be a home or auto owner buying insurance. You don't buy insurance policies hoping that their house catches fire or their car is totaled. People buy insurance hoping they never have to use it. Gold often serves a similar purpose in a portfolio, if there's for a period when other assets are under stress. Silver, however, is a very different animal. Silver has always had a monetary history similar to gold, but today it's also an incredibly important industrial metal. It's used in solar panels, electric vehicles, medical equipment, electronics, semiconductors, and countless other products that power our modern economy. That means silver's price isn't driven solely by investor demand. It's also influenced by what's happening in the manufacturing and global economic growth. When factories are busy and industrial demand is strong, silver often benefits. During economic slowdowns, however, that industrial demand can weaken, making silver much more volatile than gold.
Yeah, and that's really the biggest difference between the two. Gold is primarily a monetary asset. Silver is both a monetary asset and an industrial commodity. Because the silver market is much smaller than the gold market, price swings can be dramatic. In a strong precious metal bull market, silver has historically outperformed gold, but during downturns, it can decline more sharply.
So if someone asks which one is better, my answer is it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If your goal is preserving purchasing power and adding stability to a diversified portfolio, gold has historically been the first choice. If you're willing to accept more volatility in exchange for potentially greater upside, silver can play a role as well. To me, the fascinating thing is that central banks own tens of thousands of tons of gold as a reserve asset. They own virtually no silver. That tells you a lot about how governments view the two metals. If you were building a long-term portfolio that included precious metals, you can generally think of gold as the foundation and silver as a smaller component, not necessarily an either-or decision.
At the end of the day, precious metals aren't meant to replace great businesses. Stocks remain one of the best ways to build wealth over long periods because businesses create value. Gold and silver simply play a different role. They can help preserve purchasing power, diversity risk, and potentially provide stability when markets become uncertain. Like every investment, they have strengths and weaknesses. The key is understanding what you own and why you own it. When your investments each have a clear purpose, you're much more likely to stay disciplined no matter what the market decides to do next.
Now up for another article, Women, Wealth, and the Future of Investing. Women are playing an increasingly influential role in wealth management, investing, and corporate leadership. Today, women manage more wealth than ever before, invest across a broad range of asset classes, and influence financial markets through their roles as shareholders, executives, and corporate board members. The evolution is particularly significant when viewed against the historical challenges women have faced in the financial industry. Wealth management and finance have traditionally been male-dominated fields, and women investors were often overlooked by financial advisors and researchers. Common stereotypes portrayed women as less financially confident, less sophisticated investors, and more risk-averse than their male counterparts. These perceptions contributed to a pattern of underinvestment and underplanning among many women, potentially limiting long-term wealth accumulation and financial security.
As the wealth management industry continues to evolve, there is growing recognition that women are not a single demographic group with identical financial needs and goals. Understanding the unique perspectives, priorities, and challenges women face can help support more effective financial planning and investment strategies. Women are no longer a niche segment within the financial marketplace. They already control a significant share of household wealth and are expected to become an even greater force in the coming years. Women currently control more than $10 trillion with a T in U.S. household financial assets. By 2030, projections suggest women could control approximately $30 trillion, representing nearly 2/3 of the nation's personal wealth. Much of this growth is expected to come through the ongoing transfer of wealth between generations, as women tend to outlive men and often become primary decision makers regarding family assets. As wealth increases, so does influence. Women today control more investable assets voting shares in corporate leadership positions than ever before. Female representation on corporate boards continues to grow, bringing a wide range of perspective to business strategy, governance, and investment decisions.
Yeah, it's good. Many women have built successful careers as business owners, executives, and industry leaders. These experiences often influence the way they approach investing in wealth management. As shareholders and board members, women are increasingly using their positions to encourage corporate policies and business tactics to reflect the needs of diverse employees, customers, and stakeholders. Their influence extends beyond the financial returns and into broader discussions about corporate responsibility, workplace culture, and long-term sustainability. The rise of impact investing has further expanded opportunities for investors to align their financial goals with personal values. Many investors now seek strategies that pursue competitive financial performance while supporting causes and initiatives that are meaningful to them.
Despite significant progress, underinvestment remains a concern for many women investors. Research suggests that women often seek a higher level of understanding before investing in unfamiliar asset classes. Professional responsibilities, family commitments, and caregiving roles can leave limited time for conducting investment research or evaluating new opportunities. While the effects of underinvestment may not appear significant in the short term, the long-term consequences can be substantial. Missing opportunities for growth can impact wealth accumulation and the ability to preserve assets across multiple generations.
Alternative investments can play an important role in addressing this challenge. Asset classes such as private equity, private credit, and hedge funds may offer additional diversification and access to areas of the economy not available through traditional public markets. For example, companies are remaining private for longer periods than in previous decades. As a result, some of the most significant growth opportunities may occur before a company becomes publicly traded. Private equity investments can provide access to these earlier stages of business development and allow investors to participate in a larger portion of a company's growth cycle. As financial education and confidence continue to increase, more women are exploring sophisticated investment strategies and incorporating a broader range of asset classes into their portfolios.
Many women serve as primary decision makers within their households, balancing responsibilities related to family, career, caregiving, and financial management. These competing priorities can make it difficult to dedicate time to long-term financial and estate planning. However, developing a comprehensive financial plan remains one of the most important steps toward achieving long-term financial security. Goals-based planning can help coordinate investment strategies, retirement planning, estate planning, and wealth transfer objectives into a unified framework. A well-designed financial plan provides structure and direction while allowing individuals and families to focus on the personal and professional priorities. Regular monitoring and adjustments can help ensure progress toward both short-term and long-term goals.
Yeah, and the future of wealth management is increasingly being shaped by women. As wealth transfers continue and women assume larger roles in financial decision-making, their influence on investment trends, corporate governance, and financial markets is expected to continue to grow. Future generations of women will inherit not only significant financial assets, but also greater access to education, information, technology, and investment opportunities. They're demonstrating that it is possible to simultaneously serve as a caregiver, a business leader, household financial decision maker, and wealth creators. As the financial landscape continues to evolve, understanding the needs, priorities, and perspectives of women investors will remain an important part of helping individuals and families build, preserve, and transfer wealth for future generations.
So I just thought about something. So I'm seeing a lot of women who've inherited the wealth. They've outlived their husbands. They have children, and they're trying to figure out what to do with all this money because they don't need it. They're not spenders. I mean, that's typically what I see is they're spenders and they want to give. And so I have a lot of people more than ever before in my entire history in this business looking at giving to charities more frequently because they want to make a difference and their kids don't need the money.
We know historically too, it's been the men who have done the financing. And even we talked about it on the show a few weeks back, it used to be when you met with someone about their investments. It was just a guy that came in.
Right.
And now you're seeing men and women come in together.
Yes.
I'm glad to see that's happening because if you don't know how to deal with money to begin with, and then you get a sudden large amount of money just dropped in your lap, it could be very, very bad, and people can take advantage of you. So if anybody's out there and they want to know more about how to manage money, and you think you're going to run into a financial windfall down the road, come see us. I mean, this is something that we do on a regular basis.
Yep, and it doesn't cost you anything. All righty, moving back home used to be a sign of failure. Now it shows financial savvy. Nearly half of American adults under 30, pinched by the high cost of housing, have moved back home. Last year, nearly half, 49% of adults under age 30, live with a parent, and that percentage has increased 12 percentage points since 2019. Many people, for whatever reason, are doing this. It could be changes in job status, relational breakups, or rent increases that make the current living quarters unaffordable, which is big time. Whatever the reason, most intend that this stay would be short term. Living at home as a 20-something was once viewed as a failure to launch and even a source of embarrassment in a culture that places a premium on independence. That is no longer the case. Living at home is now often viewed as a sign of financial prudence and for some, a long-term prospect.
High living costs are helping to reshape the milestones of early adulthood in America. The national median home price hovers above $400,000. Rents are at a record high in cities across the U.S., and many recent college graduates are stuck with tens of thousands of dollars in student debt. Even though some of these adults pay their parents' rent, it tends to be well below the cost of living on their own.
Yeah, and many say the cost of everything has increased, making them feel like just about everything is out of reach. One of the people interviewed by the Wall Street Journal was quoted to say, if a young person wants to live alone, you can do it, but you'd be dead broke at the end of the month. And I hear and read about that all the time.
That's where I was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I just more like 45 years ago.
Right.
And I think it also comes down to your status, because my friends that are in relationships with two incomes are out on their own. My single friends, however, are living with roommates or with their parents. I think that for my single income friends, it's just not reasonable for them to try and live on their own. When I was living...
Corey, too, the thing is, I know, and Sherry and I have talked about this, when we were younger, if housing was out of our reach, we always found a roommate and someone to split with it. And that's the kind of things that people have to do is if they want to be on their own, they've got to, think outside their comfort zone and find someone to help share some of that cost.
Yeah.
I always look back at when I got out of college and got my first job working with this, basically being a social worker for a, what kind of facility was that? I can't think of the name.
Mental health facility.
Oh, yeah, mental health facility. So anyways, I'm working in mental health, which is a very depressing job. I got the cheapest place I could rent in Boise, Idaho. I mean, it was a dump. And it was tiny, but it's the cheapest thing I could do. I barely had but just enough money left over to buy food for the rest of the week after I paid my rent. I mean, it was ridiculous back then. And so this doesn't surprise me because rents are so much higher and you have to really be careful where you want to rent.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, when I was first going to college in Florida, I had a roommate, and that was more than reasonable. I was working full time. I was able to pay my portion of the rent, and I was able to even put money away. But he got to the point where it wasn't good for him. And when he moved out, my rent was 60% of my take home pay. Then you add car payment, my insurance, gas, food, other costs. It left me with very little to put away in case some mystery expense were to come out of nowhere. In my case, it was doable, but the second income would have made a huge difference. But for some people, depending on where you live, it still isn't enough to get by even with a second income.
Yep. All right. But today things are different. That ever so sticky inflation has people reassessing costs on just about everything. And since housing is one of the largest bills people must pay every month, it's no wonder people are moving back home. There's a study that was produced by the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard that shows the average monthly mortgage payment for a medium price home in 2024 was $2,570, plus roughly $700 in additional costs such as property taxes, insurance, and mortgage insurance, bringing the total average monthly housing payment to about $3,270. And this is up from about $2,050 in 2021. And that is a $1,225 a month increase each month. That's a giant increase, and definitely one that would work or outright wreck an individual budget.
It really would. I think we're at halftime, so we will be right back.
You've been listening to Your Money, brought to you by Lifespan Wealth Management, proudly serving Middle Georgia for over 30 years. Our mission? Helping folks just like you plan for a secure and stress-free retirement. Need a trusted financial advisor? Call us today at 478-922-8100 and schedule your complimentary consultation at our Macon or Warner Robins office. Want to learn more? Visit us anytime at retirerelax.com. Because when you plan smart, you can retire and relax. And here's something extra. We offer free educational seminars for the community. If your group needs a guest speaker, give us a call and let's make it happen. That's 478-922-8100. Now, let's get back to the show.
I don't really think young people want to move back home, but with the rent mortgage increases like this, it's no wonder so many have chosen to move back home. About 55% of young adults who moved back home said it was out of financial necessity. So many parents and adult children are living together now that it is beginning to transform aspects of American society. From when members of the younger generation start a family to the way builders think about designing homes. Far from hiding it, some now broadcast their lives as stay-at-home daughters or stay-at-home sons on social media.
Interesting. But when people move in with each other, you need to set the ground rules up front. Issues surrounding rent or no rent, utilities, food, chores all need to be discussed. This could help smooth the transition. Pew Research data shows that July 2020, 52% of young Americans aged 18 to 29 lived with at least one parent. That is the first time a majority of young adults in the country has lived with parents since the Great Depression. That share has likely dropped since then, but for some people, the arrangements have stuck.
Yep, that's right. States such as California and New York have loosened regulations around building accessory dwellings, or ADUs, in recent years. Once nicknamed granny flats, the ADUs are now used to house budget suites for adult children. And as you've probably guessed, COVID flipped the script on all of this. People are no longer ashamed of living at home, and they don't judge other people for doing it either. Personally, I think it's a great way for families to provide for the assistance for their children. It could be a great way for people to save money for the future or save up the necessary money to purchase their own home.
I agree. If people can assist each other in this way, it is good for everyone involved. I imagine having the young people back in the house and possibly with smaller children added to the mix could be healthy for a lot of people. In my case, however, I got a suitcase for high school graduation and was expected to never come back home. Literally, my dad said, "You're gone and you're never coming back." I mean, flat out. I worked in mental health and was so broke, it was crazy. I barely had enough money to buy food for the week and made a pot of stew, and that's what I ate all week until I met Randy. I didn't even get a new battery for my car. Right. Remember that?
Yep. I think it's why you kept me around. It's kind of funny that your dad gave you a suitcase and said,
see you later.
See you later. My mom and dad were completely opposite. They built their house in Hampton, and they built the entire upstairs. So if any kids ever needed or wanted to come back and live there, they could. Mm-hmm. So I think
we had a basement, but I couldn't get in it.
Yeah. All right. And since we're talking about people moving back home, there was another article I ran across that shows an increase in housing costs are pushing foreclosures to a 6-year high. With foreclosure filings up 26% in the first quarter of this year. And the culprit is the fast rising insurance and increased property values, which increases their taxes. But it's another sign that more people are struggling, especially when rising costs for home insurance, property taxes, or homeowners association dues push up their monthly bills. For some, their student loan payments have also returned. And adding to that adds to their expenses. Delinquencies for credit card bills and car loans have also risen. These new causes of distress could be a warning sign of more pain to come.
Homeowners who bought their homes within the past few years might be even worse off because they bought at higher mortgage rates. In some areas, prices have slipped, leaving some owners underwater. They also have fewer relief options that they did during the pandemic. Many are suffering from payment shocks from taxes and insurance, along with potential job distress. Especially for homeowners who bought recently, it's the layering effect that are creating distress. The average annual home insurance bill was $2,948 last year, up 12% from 2024, and the average property tax for U.S. single-family homes rose 3% to $4,427.
The thing is, homeowners were comfortable with their monthly cost when they bought their home, but all of a sudden, a year later or 3 years later, that mortgage payment jumps beyond that percentage that they had accounted for. One of the problems is that property values have risen significantly in the past 3 years, and with that increase comes higher tax bills and increased insurance premiums. Often, these increases are not expected and add significant pressure to a household budget. Property taxes and insurance are squeezing older homeowners who live on fixed incomes. A significant increase in insurance taxes can affect this demographic more than others.
Yep. These increased costs are also affecting condo associations and are also causing some owners to fall behind on those payments. Homeowners associations filed about 285,000 liens in 2025. That was about a 9% year-over-year increase. So if you find yourself falling behind on your mortgage, it is advisable to contact the company, your mortgage company, and see what they can do to help you. Mortgage companies really don't want to foreclose. It costs them a lot of money to do that. So open up a line of communication with them and see what they can do to assist you. All right. Next up is this year's job market is shaping up to be surprisingly stable. Halfway through the year, the labor market is flashing a virtue that has proved elusive for much of 2025, and that is stability. American hiring in 2026 hasn't quite boomed, but it has broadly improved. The latest numbers released recently by the Labor Department were a disappointment. June's 57,000 new jobs fell well short of Wall Street's forecast. Sectors that reflected the current health of the economy, including retail and leisure and hospitality, lost jobs. Yet, look beyond the monthly numbers, and the job market has steadily, if not spectacularly, added an average of around 92,000 jobs a month so far this year. That's a giant leap from the average net losses of 8,000 positions a month over the second half of 2025. It isn't a repeat of the unstoppable wave of jobs created in the years just after the pandemic, but dependable monthly job creation and stronger staffing across a range of industries has made the job market much less concerning than the hiring we've seen last year.
Then there is the unemployment rate. In June, despite the lower than expected hiring, it actually dropped to 4.2% from 4.3%. That is good news on the surface, but the cause is less than ideal. Thursday's data indicates that the unemployment rate was pulled lower by the unusually large decline in the number of Americans who are either unemployed or looking for work. With fewer people in the job market, the unemployment rate can fall even when the number of jobs created is falling too.
Economists were scratching their heads over what exactly caused the big drop in the number of workers over the month. Many said they believe it was a statistical fluke that could reverse in coming months. But the one thing they do agree on is the size of the workforce has been stagnating for months. Retiring baby boomers are one likely reason. Immigrants dropping out of the workforce during immigration crackdowns is likely another. There were about 169 million people in the civilian labor force in June, down nearly 2.2 million, which is 1.3% from a peak in November. Still, it is a job market many economists and investors would have welcomed 6 months ago, when month-to-month hiring was inconsistent and often heavily concentrated in such fields as education and healthcare. In each of the past few months, more industries have been adding jobs than losing them. A year ago, the opposite was true. Less whiplash regarding federal economic policy has left businesses more comfortable shifting into hiring mode. Just 12 months ago, companies were facing steep new tariffs, and Congress was wrapping up tense negotiations over President Trump's tax cut bill. Now, companies are landing tariff refunds, and the tax cuts have likely supported consumers and businesses.
Yep, and there was a period of policy uncertainty last year, but luckily uncertainty is more in the background now, and we're seeing the labor market begin to pick up. It is interesting that despite the elevated inflation, consumers are still spending freely, especially wealthier consumers or customers benefiting from the surging stock market. There's a clear division between the more affluent and the more value-driven mid-market travelers. Heading into the summer, the labor market faces questions about the number of people available to work and businesses' appetite to hire more. When July data arrives next month, economists will be watching closely for confirmation that the June labor force drop wasn't the start of a trend. Meanwhile, steady spending growth across the economy has given companies more reason to add staff. In the midst of booming investments in AI infrastructure, the construction sector has added jobs in 5 of the last 6 months after uneven hiring last year.
Consumer spending has been decent, up an inflation-adjusted 2.1% over the 12 months through May, although some economists and business owners are concerned that the elevated inflation could force shoppers to tighten their budgets. People can see the inflation in their personal expenditures. If you're feeling the pinch caused by inflation, then create a budget and track your spending to see where you can cut expenses.
Agreed.
Okay. Let's discuss how the new Fed chair could impact what you pay in taxes this year. As Kevin Warsh starts leading the Federal Reserve, interest rate policy will shape household earnings and taxable income. After months of scrutiny around the Federal Reserve and its leadership, President Donald Trump's nominee, Kevin Warsh, is the chair of the Federal Reserve. The vote approved him was the 54-45 from the Senate and was the narrowest in modern federal chair history. Warsh has signaled his opinion and support for maintaining the Fed's strict independence with regard to interest rate decisions. Senators asked him how he would navigate inflation, borrowing costs, and financial conditions. And this is important because whether a Fed chair is viewed as politically independent matters, since confidence in the Fed's inflation strategy can influence markets, borrowing costs, and expectations for future interest rates.
Yeah, and all of this wrangling aside, a practical question is emerging for some, and that is, what does a change in the leadership of the Fed actually mean for taxes? First things first. The Federal Reserve doesn't set tax rates. Congress does that with implementation help from the U.S. Treasury Department and the IRS. However, the Fed sets interest rates through a vote on its policymaking committee, the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, which you know of, led by the Fed chair. Still, no Fed chair unilaterally controls interest rates and inflation or labor market conditions. Broader economic trends often carry more weight than any one official's preferences.
But the Fed's interest rate decision can ripple through the economy, affecting household finances, including your taxable income, and that impact is often most visible in savings and cash returns. At the moment, with interest rates still elevated, savings accounts, money market funds, and short-term treasuries are generally paying far more than they did just a few years ago. High-yield savings accounts are now commonly near the 4 to 5% range. Treasury bills offer similar yields, and for some, that can translate into hundreds or even thousands of dollars a year in interest income, depending on account balances. The bad news? That income is taxed as ordinary income at the federal level in the year that it's earned. So for retirees, savers, and others holding significant cash outside tax advantage accounts, that can translate into a higher tax bill, which I'm hearing from my clients every week.
As a result, retirees and conservative savers who moved money into CDs, money market funds, or treasury bills during a rate hiking cycle might be among the households most likely to notice a difference when filing taxes. Be aware that interest from savings accounts is generally taxable at both the federal and state levels, while interest earned from U.S. Treasury securities is exempt from state and local income taxes. It's also important to keep in mind that wages, interest, investment gains, and home sales are all treated differently under the U.S. tax code, and those differences shape when taxes are owed and how much.
Yep. Wages are taxed as ordinary income as they're earned, typically through withholding from paychecks. As we mentioned, interest income and short-term investment gains are also taxed at the ordinary income tax rates. And long-term capital gains on stocks are generally taxed at a rate of either 0, 15, or 20%, depending on income. Short-term, that's less than a year, gains are taxed at ordinary income rates. In many cases, taxes are only triggered when assets are sold. As a result, two households with similar overall returns can still face very different tax outcomes depending on how those returns are generated.
And then there's inflation. Over the past few years, relatively high inflation has driven up the cost of living. Some estimates put the increase at 20% over the last 5 years. I could see that at the grocery store pretty much. However, this year, wage growth hasn't kept pace for many workers, even as savings income has risen alongside higher interest rates. That mix can increase taxable income even when households don't feel financially ahead. For example, a raise that only offsets higher costs for rent, groceries, or insurance can still push more income into a higher tax bracket, and higher interest earnings can have a similar effect.
Yes, the IRS adjusts tax brackets annually for inflation, which is designed to help blunt the impact. But when wages, interest income, or investment gains rise simultaneously, larger portions of income can still be taxed at higher marginal rates. It is worth noting that any policy shifts under new Fed leadership would likely unfold gradually and be shaped primarily by inflation and growth trends. So for many people, any near-term impact is likely to be limited.
If rates remain elevated, then savings accounts and money market funds continue generating higher taxable interest. Households with large cash balances see more income reported to the IRS. Depending on the specific situation, some savers may face higher tax bills or smaller tax refunds. On the other hand, if rates decline, then cash yields can gradually ease and borrowing costs typically go down. When rates fall, financial activity in housing and equities tend to pick up. For some, the tax shift tied to interest rates is already visible. Interest income that barely registered a few years ago is noticeable when filing taxes. Of course, that does not necessarily mean people are better off, but it can change what they owe to the IRS when federal tax returns are due. Bottom line, when you don't necessarily need to follow the bottom line is you don't necessarily need to follow every single Fed meeting or policy speech. But changes in interest rates and the people setting them can still quietly shape what you end up owing at tax time. So stay tuned.
Very good. Next up, who benefits from the Supreme Court home equity theft ruling? The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that home equity theft violates the Constitution. What does that mean for homeowners? A 94-year-old woman who lost her home and her home equity due to past due property taxes scored a huge win at the U.S. Supreme Court. In the case, Tyler versus Hennepin County, a unanimous court ruled it is unconstitutional for a state to take your home to cover your property tax bill while pocketing the profit from your surplus home equity. Since more than a dozen states allow what some call home equity theft, the court's ruling will impact homeowners across the country.
Yeah, writing for the court, Chief Justice John Roberts pointed to history and precedent, saying that while the county had the power to sell Tyler's home to recover the unpaid property taxes, it could not use the tax debt to confiscate more property than was due. Christina Martin of the Pacific Legal Foundation, who argued Tyler's case before the Supreme Court, welcomed the ruling and said that the court ruling makes clear that home equity theft is not only unjust, but it's unconstitutional. This legal challenge began when property taxes, a fact of life for millions of U.S. homeowners. If you don't pay the property tax due on your home, you can ultimately risk losing your property. But property taxes, which are rising in many states and are a significant expense for many homeowners, are also important for the states and the localities. Property tax revenue is often used to support critical state infrastructure and services.
There was a case reported by Kiplinger where a property owner owed $15,000 in property taxes on her Minnesota condo, which she lived in for more than 10 years before moving into a senior assisted living community. After failing to collect the property tax debt from the owner, Hennepin County, Minnesota sold Tyler's home at auction for $40,000. But rather than returning the remaining $25,000 to the homeowner, the county kept the surplus home equity. Tyler sued, arguing that retaining the surplus from the sale of her home violated the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and that it was also an unconstitutionally excessive fine. Hennepin County argued that Tyler didn't have a property interest in her home's equity and that it followed state law in retaining the surplus funds from the sale of the condo.
The U.S. Supreme Court agreed with the homeowner and unanimously ruled that the county had effected a classic taking in which the government directly appropriates private property for its own use. What exactly is a taking? The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution prohibits the government from taking property without just compensation. So, under the law, a taking is when the federal government takes private property and converts it for public use. Just compensation under the law is a fair and reasonable amount. With a home, for example, just compensation might be the property's fair market value.
Okay, so what does Tyler versus Hennepin mean for homeowners? The court noted in its ruling that most states and the federal government require excess value to be returned to the taxpayer whose property is sold to satisfy the outstanding tax debt. However, about a dozen states can take and sell your home to cover the property tax bill while pocketing any profit from their surplus home equity. So this ruling will likely force certain states and localities to change their retention approaches and potentially face litigation and liability. The Pacific Legal Foundation cites data showing that U.S. homeowners lost more than $860 million in life savings on more than 8,950 homes.
So, which states retain your home equity? States that currently retain the surplus equity in your home are Arizona, Oregon, Colorado, South Dakota, Minnesota, Nebraska, Illinois, Alabama, New York, New Jersey, Maine, and Massachusetts. The practice is also allowed in the District of Columbia. According to Pacific Legal Foundation, states that allow home equity theft in certain situations include Montana, Idaho, Nevada, California, Alaska, Texas, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Rhode Island. Georgia is not on either list. So if your home is sold on the courthouse steps, as many are for back taxes, and you have equity in the property in excess of what the taxes are owed, then you should receive the difference.
As a side note, I meet with a lot of people who are inheriting their parents' property and they have never heard of a step-up in cost basis. And so, here's an example. My dad had a lake house and he had 5 kids. So I'm one of the 5 kids. He passed away. We each inherited this lake house, which was worth about $500,000.
Right.
So we each got $100,000 tax-free because of the step-up in cost basis to the date of death value. And my brothers were insistent that they owed taxes on this money. And I'm like, no, this is tax-free.
It always surprises us at how many people
and
come
they're 15 years older than me.
Well,
I didn't know this.
Yeah, but we see all the time people come see us and they go, I got to pay taxes on the house.
Yes.
And once they learn they don't have to, they are
blown away.
Yeah. But here's the other thing, too, is that we have a friend that just recently, just a couple of days ago, was complaining about the fact that they had to pay a lot on taxes because her parent had given them a lot of property and that she wanted to do it before she died. And that you don't get the step up in cost then. So
that's why gifting is bad.
Gifting it now put them in a very, very bad position. They actually had to go sell property to pay the taxes on all this stuff because it was just, you're getting something for free, so your cost basis is zero, and then whatever you sell it for is 100% taxable. So you got to be very careful in those situations.
And I'm just amazed that when people inherit and they go and sit down and they have to do the paperwork and everything because they're inheriting property, that the lawyers don't explain to them the step up in cost basis.
Right.
I don't understand this at all. I don't understand. It's crazy, but anyways.
So.
All right.
Anyway, I'm not sure we have enough time to get through this last article here, but I will go back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the show and say that if you've got if you're interested in supporting Gabriel Eisner, they would really appreciate any support they can get. Support.now
Supportnow.org.
Supportnow.org, excuse me. The crazy thing on that site is you can donate hotel points and all kinds of things that people need, not just money. But they've got like we said, they've got a big hill to climb now, and Gabriel's got a good attitude about everything. But, this is a life-altering event for him. So anyway, you can find him on the site. Just look for Gabriel Eisner, and I think he's the only Eisner on the site. So anyway, everyone, thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to being with you next week.
And if you'd like to follow the process, I think they also have daily updates on that Support Now, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
I don't know. I'm not dialed in on that one.
Okay. Well, it was great talking to everyone, and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks for listening to Your Money, produced by Lifespan Wealth Management. As financial advisors, the main thing they do is provide retirement planning and advice and manage their clients' investment accounts. If you're looking for a financial advisor, please contact their office at 478-922-8100 to set up your complimentary consultation. You can learn more about them by visiting their website, retirerelax.com. And if you have a question or a topic that you would like them to cover in next week's broadcast, you can email Randy at rfmoney.com. They look forward to connecting with you next week. Have a great weekend, everyone. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth.